Hey guys, this is a video overview of the current state of my game project and a discussion on what the final design of the game will be. This game is tentatively titled Finity Worlds and is a voxel-based sandbox game. I'd like to say the final game will have the freedom and world building of Minecraft, the base building and automation of Factorio, and FPS combat unique to itself. The style I'm aiming for is something like what is already shown, a mixture of abstract and sci-fi. This is still early footage, and there's a lot of room to improve both functionally and artistically. I've been working on this game for over 2 years, and even longer counting the time working on the engine. The engine is built in C++, and it basically runs a game script, and the game script can be Lua or MoonScript, which converts to Lua. Pretty much the entire game is made in MoonScript, which is really great to use. It's high performance, and it looks a lot like Python. Let it be noted that I do not have a great computer, so recording this brings in some frame skips that are not present when you're just running it, and even on my outdated computer it runs really smoothly. First, let's talk about what is currently working in this project. We have an editable voxel system with a world lighting scheme and also point-based lighting. Each material can have unique properties which are relevant when placing, destroying, walking on, or whatever other way we might interact with these materials in the world. And I think there's a lot of easy progress to be made simply by thinking up new properties for these materials that would be appropriate and have them relate to how we interact with them in the world. Each world is generated with a function that takes in the XYZ coordinates and outputs a tile index. We can use images as a sort of height map and use multiple images to approximate a 3D height map. The generator function can also call other generator functions, so it's simple to make a biome system. In our main world, we are calling one of 4 generators, each on one side of an X that runs throughout the world. Obviously, each world you might travel to can use the same or a different generator function. We have a robust entity system that easily supports enemies, allies, any mobile actors, or static machines you might place in the world. Each entity can have their own user interface, which allows them to interact with items, and the entity system also supports a background emulation, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Our game has standard support for both items and interfaces, so it's easy to add items and it's easy to add new user interfaces that are either player-based or entity-based. We have a world instancing system which allows for portals to new worlds or even new gameplay modes. The portals don't need to be in the world physically like they are now. You can use some sort of ability to move between worlds or to activate a world for a short period of time. Worlds can change some minor things to be a slightly different experience or a whole new game with shared items in between. The worlds in this game are currently laid out in a 2D grid, which isn't required but is the current design used to demonstrate portals. The portal map currently shows which world you're in, and even though each world is infinite, there will probably be incentive to go to different worlds and build on them and eventually connect them. With all of that, we've built a basic game that contains the core elements that will be used in the development of the final product. We currently have working world materials, world generation, portals, entities, building block items, and equipable items, all features which can be used to build an interesting game quickly. From this point on, the biggest challenge is finalizing the design and implementing it. With most of the underlying work done, development is moving pretty quickly now. As an example, about 1 month ago, the only enemy that existed was a floating white sphere that when you killed it, it would disappear without any sound and it didn't even attack you. So once the first enemy was done, it took about 2 days to add the second bouncing enemy. It took about 2 minutes to modify the primary laser gun into a new, faster, wider spread gun, which you see in the trailer video. It took about 2 days to add 3 of the 4 world generator types, the 4th already existing in the game for a while now. So with that said, now we can discuss where this game is going and what the vision is for the full featured release. The three core features of the game will be base building and defending, exploration and combat, and production and infrastructure. All areas of the game will have some sort of progression to make it easier, to make your character more powerful, and to give you more options. The player will be able to build a base in the world that has important machinery and defenses. The defenses will be emulated when you are not at your base, so they will still defend your base, and you will complement those defenses with your own combat when you are at the base. The base building should allow the player to be creative. Some building materials can start off rare, but there should always be ways to progress, so almost any material can be used in large-scale building eventually. We will have decorative entities as well, which will be both a resource sink and a way for the player to display their progress. We will also have machinery at the base, but we'll get back to that. Exploration and combat. The trailer primarily shows the beginnings of these things. We can have different movement modes for both exploration and combat. They might be tied to vehicles, so there's an additional cost in creating the vehicle and fueling them, and you might lose the vehicle if you stray beyond your means. And we will have a range of combat difficulty. There will be some model of power scaling for enemies as you go further from the starting base, from the center of the map, or into new worlds. Obviously, using the item system, it will be easy to add player progression, and the linear power scaling means players can always find an area that is both challenging and offers relevant rewards in loot and territory. Many different things can be done with combat. As it's one of the most important parts of the game, it needs to be designed carefully. We currently have a working equipable item system that we call a loadout, in which a player can equip weapons, passive items, and abilities. And right now we have two working passive items, one that gives you invulnerability and one that increases your movement speed, just to demonstrate how these things work. We'll give the player reasons to explore instead of only fighting their way through the map. If you find a certain type of point on the map, it can be both a travel point your character can teleport to and from, or a transport for items. Both of these will be expensive at first, but you can make them cheaper by progressively unlocking them throughout the game. This means you can travel far from your base, but always have some means of returning. So the last core feature of this game is production and infrastructure. And at this point we can start talking about entities and machines. So machines will be processing at your base, and will have some reason to center them all at your base and to expand to new bases. Machines can also exist out in the world for gathering and transporting materials en masse. Most materials we will have some capacity to collect on our own, but eventually you can conquer an area with enough kills or by defeating a boss so that you can build machinery there and set up defenses. There will be some sort of transport capacity from these outposts to your main base, perhaps vehicles using roads you've built, or an even more automated system that requires little to no maintenance from the player. At your base, using the machines you've built, you process and enrich these materials into fuel, ammo, new machines, gear upgrades, building materials, blocks, or whatever else your player could use. There will be some sort of crafting system, perhaps using multiple recipes for an item that are slightly randomized. This feature actually already exists in the game, but the interface is probably the ugliest thing that I've ever made, so I'm not going to show it off right now. As a player, you'll have a central base and outposts. There may be incentive over time to build a base in a tougher area with better energy and resources, but more risk of enemies destroying it if you aren't prepared. Okay, so let's talk about the technical aspects of entities, as they are the object most used in the game. An entity such as an enemy obviously exists somewhere in the map and can be optionally saved with the chunk when the chunk is unloaded. When it is reloaded, the entity knows how long it's been asleep, and if it was doing something like smelting material A to B, it can easily catch up so it appears it's been working all along from the player's perspective. That's fine for entities working alone, but when they interact, that solution isn't good enough. For entities part of a simulation, they can remain partly loaded in the background and not drawn, obviously. In this state, they will still know what their connections and neighbors are, so the production and processing chain can continue no matter where in the map the player is. We already have the capacity to do this in the engine. Obviously, the issue with that setup would be performance. If we allow people to scale up to thousands of machines, that will soon have a notable impact on performance. However, it would be easy to give this background entity system a limit of how many entities it can process per frame or how much time per frame to spend doing these updates. So one entity might be updated only once every few seconds, but the general simulation will still move forward relatively smoothly, perhaps with a slight decrease in output gameplay-wise, but with no decrease in game performance. This means there's a ton of potential to have a huge simulation built by the player if that is the direction decided on. Any system like that would be optional and have some easy alternative that's perhaps less optimal for those who don't care about that type of gameplay. The potential of voxel-based games has not thoroughly been explored just yet, and that's why I decided to go this direction with my game. If we finish the features we discussed, I think we will end up with a fun, interesting, and unique product. With enough work, this game could potentially set the bar for future voxel-based games. It's taken a lot of work to get it to this point, but I'm very happy with where it's at. And now I'm ready to do the last bit of work, finish strong, and make it a success. So thank you for your time.